Let's discuss the secret signs Putin is sending to the West. Indifference to whether Trump or Harris wins and their chances just over a week before a crucial day for both Democrats and democracy worldwide. This is live on YouTube channel 24. My name is Iryna Uzlova, and with us is Uriel Epstein, Executive Director of the Renew Democracy Initiative. Uriel, hello. It's a pleasure to have you here. Andriy Yermak, head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, gave an interview to Corriere della Sera, stating that Ukraine is not afraid of the upcoming U.S. elections or their outcomes. After nearly 3 years of war, he questions how they could still be fearful. Yermak highlighted the importance of U.S. politics to Ukraine and acknowledged the strong support from the American public. Andriy Yermak reminded Zelenskyy during his U.S. visit that he believes no American leader, whether Biden, Kamala Harris, or Trump, intends to support the victory of an autocracy like Russia. Yermak emphasized that Ukraine doesn't have a strong preference, as Trump has also spoken about the need for a just peace. However, he questions Trump's true commitment to opposing Russia's autocracy, citing concerns over some of his statements and behavior. And, well, I think what Yermak said and what your president should be saying, etc., they're doing what they should be doing. They should be coming forward and saying that they're going to work as well with Trump and with Harris and with anybody who's going to be the American president. That's their responsibility, and they're doing it absolutely right. I don't have that responsibility. I'm not a politician, I'm an analyst. I have our organization in the United States where we are just trying to defend democracy and oppose authoritarianism all over the world. And so I can speak, let's say, a little bit more frankly. Unfortunately, I think there's a difference, and a huge difference. We see here quite often Trump defending these authoritarian leaders. Even when he did a podcast recently with Joe Rogan in the United States, Joe Rogan was saying how bad dictators are and so on, and so on. And Trump said, yeah, but see, he's a genius. He controls 1 billion people. Just like that, he's a genius. And again, Rogan interrupted him saying, yeah, he may be smart, but he may be bad, and so on. Trump, yes, bad. But, there are some bad people out there here in the United States. We have quite a few bad people, too. And so he's always sort of minimizing the risk of these authoritarian leaders, these dictators, and saying, maybe they're not quite so bad. He always wants to add some context. So that's the point I'm very worried about from this point of view, what a future president might do here if he becomes president again, Donald Trump. The second point here is that his vice president, J.D. Vance, has said, and J.D. Vance has said many times already, that, first of all, he doesn't care. He doesn't care who wins in Ukraine. He doesn't care if it's Ukraine or Russia. He believes that America doesn't have to choose, that we have nothing to do with it. What will be, and everything else can be ignored. Moreover, one of Vance's key supporters is, of course, Elon Musk. And what we've learned recently in a Wall Street Journal article is that Musk talks to Putin often. And what's more, Putin asked Musk if he could shut down Starlink in Taiwan as a favor to Xi. And these are the kind of issues, these are the kind of things that I find very, I would say, disturbing, because we see dictators cooperating with each other. And unfortunately, in public organizations, in free countries, we don't see this cooperation. We see people like Trump, Vance, both saying that we shouldn't support other free countries and that, well, America is not the global policeman and we can just pretend like the world beyond our borders doesn't exist. Oh, and Trump also says that a domestic enemy is even more dangerous than Kim Jong-un. So if you model what Trump would have to do right now to respond to the threat that we're seeing from North Korea, which has sent its troops into the Russian-Ukrainian war field, whether it's on this side of the border or still on the other side of the border. Has Trump reacted at all? And at the same time, Uriel, how should the current White House administration react? Because they see this and they don't see that. They don't understand. why they're there to, well, go to museums?
Трамп вообще как-то реагировал на это? И в то же время, Уриэль, как должна отреагировать нынешняя администрация Белого дома? Потому что они тоже то видят, то не видят, то не понимают, зачем они там. По музеям походить.
On the one hand, Donald Trump, I haven't heard anything from him reacting to this. I certainly remember him saying not too long ago how much he and Kim Jong-un loved each other. Here they were Lapidic friends. Of course, what he says can change from day to day. The original thing he said was that his nuclear button, Trump's nuclear button, is bigger than Kim Jong-un's nuclear button. That's, of course, I'm not going to comment too much on that. But then immediately after that, he says, no, we're now best friends, we love each other, etc., etc. The fact that now they've sent 10,000 troops to Russia to support this Russian war, well, so far, I don't see any response from Trump. But frankly, I see a relatively weak response from the Biden administration as well. The Biden administration is certainly doing more than I think Trump would do. They did speak out, both Kamala and Biden. Both have spoken out, saying, of course, that this is wrong and that we will continue our support for Ukraine. But again, we see that this administration is still doing too little, too slowly, and that they are still afraid of nuclear escalation. They still don't realize that the more these authoritarian leaders see weakness on the part of the free world, the more they will threaten us all. We could have won this war. You could have won this war a year or two ago if we had given you what you needed to advance during your counteroffensives. Unfortunately, we were too afraid of that escalation, and we didn't do enough. The irony is that it is this very fear of escalation that could lead to a new escalation. Это что вот этот страх, эта эскалация, это как раз может привести. This could lead to what we are afraid of, because when they see that we are weak, they will, on the contrary, attack even more, act more aggressively. Here we are now seeing the result. North Korea in Russia is the result of America's weakness. It is the result of the weakness of the free world. It seems that we do not understand enough how much this war is not only about Ukraine, but also with the entire free world. And it seems that very few people, unfortunately, in the Western world realize this, unless they live in Eastern Europe. The countries of Eastern Europe, Poland, Lithuania, and so on, realize this very well. But I have big questions for Western Europe and America. Of course, I'm very worried about what the next administration might be. I think on the one hand, Kamala will probably be more aggressive than Biden. But if Trump becomes president, first of all, absolutely nobody knows what will happen. But I think it's much more likely that he will, on the contrary, seek some kind of treaty with Putin. But we all realize that to negotiate with Putin is either impossible or it's not a treaty, it's just surrender. Yes, that's unequivocal. Because any freeze on the war, which Putin apparently desires, he will only use to build up his forces. Since the start of the conflict 8 years ago, beginning with the annexation of Crimea and the occupation of Donetsk and Luhansk regions, we've seen that it was the Kremlin that violated nearly 200 agreements during this time. We have 1,000 people watching live on YouTube. Please like the stream. Your support helps our conversation reach more viewers. Feel free to ask your questions as well. Uriel, I'm going to ask too, anything that interests you about domestic politics in the United States and our interactions with our partners, allies, friends. Any way you look at it, Uriel, what gives us reason to believe that Kamala Harris's policies, as you mentioned, might actually be tougher than those of the current White House? Perhaps because Sullivan won't be there anymore. Perhaps because there will be new faces there. Our experts are more cautious, still believe that this will be nothing but a continuation of exactly the policies of the current White House Chief of Staff, Joe Biden. So the fact that it could be a continuation, I think, is the worst-case scenario. Here I think that's the minimum. Let's start there. It can't be worse than the current policy. I don't think it could be worse in a Kamala administration than it is in a Trump administration. Absolutely, it could be. So that's just the base I want to make. It just can't be worse. Now, can she be better? I can't guarantee it will be better, but I think there's a pretty good chance it will be better there. Why? Number one, she's a lot younger than Joe Biden. I believe she wants to leave a legacy as the black woman president who saved the free world, and she'll be keen for history to remember her that way.
Я думаю, что для нее это будет очень интересно. Вот она вот как раз будет хотеть, чтобы история ее так помнила.
Now the second point, more strategic. Of course, yes, Jake Sullivan won't. That's it. Jake's gone.
И тот, кто, вероятно, на его месте, это мужчина по названию Phil Gordon.
Phil Gordon is likely to take his place, though it's not confirmed. Recently, the administration, with Kamala among the first, stated that Ukraine should win, marking the first time we've heard such a clear stance in 3 years, which is significant.
Мы услышали, как эта администрация, и Камала была одна из первых, выступила и сказала, что Украина должна выиграть. Это первый раз, что мы слышали эти слова от этой администрации. И я думаю, что это что-то показывает.
What's more, we recently saw an $8 billion aid package for the military finally handed to you. It's, if not the biggest aid package, it's certainly one of them. And I think the experts are beginning to realize that we can't just ignore what you have going on, or gradually hand over a little bit more each time.
И, значит, я думаю, что все-таки эти эксперты начинают понимать, первое, что мы не можем просто игнорировать то, что у вас случается, или постепенно.
I think that if Kamala becomes president, there is still a chance that her response will be tougher than Joe Biden's. She might even unleash your arms and allow you to use long-range missiles. And so it will be seen, but at least there will be some chance with Kamala. With Trump, much less likely.
Ракеты более дальней дистанции. А так видно будет, но хоть какой-то шанс с Камалой будет, с Трампом намного менее вероятно.
Long-range strikes deep into Russia remain suspended for now. Lloyd Austin made an unannounced visit to Ukraine and the Vatican, discussing peace on Ukrainian terms. While the Vatican is a fitting place for such talks, Pope Francis's position is often ambiguous. During his trip, Austin stated that these long-range strikes Russia has already relocated everything. Still, I take it that it's unlikely that we should expect authorization for long-range strikes until the end of January, whatever the outcome of the state elections, or still, then it will depend on what happens. So look, what I think will happen if Trump wins this election, I think before January, because the way it works in the United States is, election on November 5th, new president comes into office on January 20. So there's about 2.5 months between the election and the new president. That's in those 2.5 months. If Trump wins, Biden will probably try to do the best he can.
Все, нет никаких гарантий. Значит, если Трамп будет президентом, возможно, иронично, хоть за эти 2 месяца...
I really hope he thinks that way to help you, because he will realize that once Trump is president, there are no guarantees anymore. If Trump is president, perhaps ironically, we may see a lot more serious help from us in these 2 months. And the more will be included that you're finally going to be allowed to do these strikes. Because what Austin is saying, I think frankly, is nonsense. It's just wrong. These strikes are going to allow you to change what Russia is doing, because primary Russia has not moved everything. Moreover, even if they have moved their warehouses, they will still hit you, say 10 to 20 kilometers from the border. If we allow you to hit you from where they are hitting you, yes, maybe you won't be able to destroy all the warehouses, but you will force the Russians to hit you from farther away, which means they will hit you less often.
Это не будут удары каждую ночь, каждый день.
It's not going to be strikes every night and every day, and it's a lot easier to hit the non-moving places where they send missiles from than it is to hit the missiles themselves. And hitting the missiles is much harder than hitting some vehicles or bases and so on. It reminds me very much of when I met with a very senior American general in the administration at the beginning of this war, who was telling us that we shouldn't send F-16s. That was 3 years ago. You have your airplanes, but aren't using half of them, likely because you're afraid they'll be shot down.
Конечно, вы не пользовались половиной из ваших самолетов из-за того, что вы боялись, чтобы их...
You couldn't use too many of those planes because it was too dangerous. If we had given you F-16s, you could have used a higher percentage of those planes because you would have had a reserve.
Вот как раз вы сумели бы пользовать больше процент из этих самолетов, потому что у вас был бы запас. Но опять же, они про эту логику не говорили, потому что они хотели просто стараться оправдаться, почему мы вам не давали F-16 с самого начала. Конечно, если бы мы этого делали...
But again, they didn't talk about that logic because they just wanted to justify why we didn't give you F-16s from the beginning. And of course, if we had, this war would be in a very different position. So again, it's very hard to look forward. But as I said, if Trump wins, I think we're going to see a big change in the 2.5 months before he becomes president. If Kamala wins, I think we're going to see relatively little in those 2.5 months. But I think there will be a decent chance that when she becomes president, we will gradually see much bigger changes. I would anticipate that in the first year of her administration, America will be much more serious about supporting Ukraine. Again, I can't guarantee that, but what I hear in Washington as I talk to people, that's the impression I get.
Но вот то, что, опять же, то, что я слышу в Вашингтоне, как я вот с людьми говорю, у меня вот составилось такое впечатление.
Uriel, good perspective. Let's hope that impression is not misleading. You know, over numerous hours of work, I still got my hands on the movie The Apprentice, the Trump story. Nothing surprised me. As Trump's actions and manipulations have already shown his nature. However, I initially thought that someone with his principles would be unlikely to concede to Putin. After watching the film, my impression changed. I now believe he would attack and refuse to admit defeat.
Говорят, что Трамп с ним договорится на его условиях, а не на условиях Украины. А теперь у меня так наоборот, как раз после просмотра этого фильма создается впечатление, что нет, что он будет атаковать, что он не будет признавать.
Putin may be the end of Putin because he's hardly the type to listen to any opinions. As much of a dictator as he is, I still don't think Trump's reasoning is quite the same. Unfortunately, it's impossible to foresee, and Trump is completely unpredictable. Which means, perhaps, I keep remembering how a few years ago when he was president, he tried to ban TikTok in America. He, using what in America is called executive action, meaning without Congress, as president, tried to ban TikTok. And of course, the court said that's illegal. The president doesn't have the right to just ban TikTok. Then last year, Congress decided to move legislation forward and ban TikTok. And Trump opposed banning it because some billionaire who worked very closely with TikTok met with him and he was persuaded that no, we need to protect TikTok.
Конгресс решил продвинуть законы и запретить TikTok, и Трамп выступил против того, чтобы запрещать TikTok.
And so again, we see how Trump can just 180-degree change day by day, year by year. Here's looking at his relationship with Putin. You could say they're semi-friends, but I would already say they're not semi-friends, but maybe 2/3 friends. I've noticed changes. One, I'll never forget Trump speaking in Helsinki when he was president.
Может быть, на 2/3 друзья. Может быть, и потому что они... Я заметил изменения. Первое, я никогда не забуду, как...
With Putin, he said that Putin promised him that Putin did not meddle in the American election, and he believes Putin, he trusts Putin, despite the fact that all American intelligence, all agencies said Putin meddled. Trump said he trusts Putin over his own intelligence. Now that, to me, I would say, is pretty bad news, that Trump is willing to trust a dictator instead.
Я бы сказал, такая не очень приятная новость, что Трамп...
To believe American intelligence.
Вместо того, чтобы верить американской разведке.
Now about Trump always fighting with everyone. Yeah, right? The problem is that I see him on the U.S. news attacking your President Zelenskyy more than Putin. For some reason, he has decided he wants to fight other leaders of the free world instead of picking fights with dictators.
И вот он почему-то решил, что он хочет драться с другими лидерами свободного мира, вместо того, чтобы передираться с диктатором.
Trump looks at himself as well, the best negotiator.
Как самый лучший deal-maker. Вот только он может придумать какие-то такие договоры.
He's the only one who can come up with some of these agreements. And he keeps bragging about how he has a good relationship with Putin, Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un, and all the others. He says it's very smart to have a good relationship with them. And that tells me that maybe he won't be willing to go up against them because he won't look at it as losing. He'll just see it as ending the war. What does losing mean to him? I don't think he, like J.D. Vance, cares who controls Crimea or Eastern Ukraine or even Kiev. I have yet to hear Trump say anything about the fact that at the beginning of this full-scale invasion in 2022, Putin tried to take Kiev and your military forces stopped him. It wasn't just that he pulled back and decided to let you have Kiev. No, you forced him to retreat.
Да нет, вы его заставили отступить. И я не вижу среди таких, как...
I don't see an understanding among the likes of Trump, J.D. Vance, and other Republicans on this issue that Putin is ready and willing to take all of Ukraine. I think Trump probably won't look at Putin's control of Eastern Ukraine and Crimea as a problem for him. Well, what does he care if Putin is willing to, say, tell Trump that that's it, I'm ready, give me Eastern Ukraine, give me Crimea, and I'll be fed up? I think Trump will agree, even though, of course, we historically realize that Putin will never be fed up. If we let him do that, then in a year, 2, 3, 4 years from now, he will start attacking again. Maybe in Ukraine, maybe in Moldova, who knows, maybe even in Lithuania. Then there will be an open question about NATO. I have a very big question mark here.
Значит, у меня тут очень большой вопросительный знак.
Let me remind your viewers that a year ago, or 2 years ago, Trump spoke to European leaders and said that if someone doesn't put enough money into NATO, Trump won't defend them. If Russia attacks NATO members who don't help America enough, then maybe America won't do anything.
И что если Россия будет атаковать членов НАТО, которые недостаточно помогают Америке, то, может быть, Америка делать ничего не будет. Несмотря на то, что в истории в НАТО...
Even though it's all based on NATO's history, that NATO only started defending a country once, in Article 5, where it says that an attack on one country is an attack on all. This has only been used once, and that was after September 11th, 2001, when all NATO members came to the defense of the United States. But you're right too, Uriel, Putin will never stop. Yes, a hybrid attack has been ongoing in Moldova for years, with Transnistria and swing elections. Look at Putin's actions in Georgia, which provided an excuse for his annexation of Crimea. J.D. Vance, when asked if Ukraine will need to cede territory to Russia, speaks ambiguously, stating that Ukrainians must make that decision themselves.
Уступить часть территории России, говорит довольно-таки неоднозначно. Словами, я честно думаю, что украинцам придется самим принять это решение. Это просто то, что...
It's just the same kind of thing that's going around before the elections, or they haven't quite put this plan together yet. In fact, maybe it's not as bad as we're making it out to be. Number one, I'll say right off the bat, there is no plan. There is no plan with the Trump administration. They have no plan. I can almost guarantee you that. So again, yes, absolutely everything could change. That the conclusions that we're drawing right now, there's no guarantee that they're right. We're working, looking at the probabilities.
Вот, значит, я вам не могу сказать, что вот я уверен, что Трамп будет делать X или Y, но я могу вам сказать, что...
I can't say for sure what Trump will do, but I believe it's more likely he'll choose one option over the other. It's possible someone like J.D. Vance or a billionaire could meet with him. Maybe even Pinchuk could have some relationship with them, as they tend to respect billionaires. Or maybe someone like that will meet them and convince them that it is in their personal interests to support Ukraine. It's certainly possible. Is it likely to happen? I don't think so, because again, we may be looking at those speakers who will be the most influential in the future Trump, in a future Trump administration.
Будущей трамповской администрации. Мы видим такие, как Tulsi Gabbard,
we see figures like Gabbard, a former Democratic Congress member who supports Putin and claims that the situation in Ukraine is the fault of NATO and the US, not Putin. Anyway, Putin is such a poor Putin who is just trying to protect Russian interests. They have people like RFK, John Kennedy, who said the same thing, and Elon Musk, who says the same thing, and Carlson, who says Ukraine is all Nazis and gays.
Который совсем говорит, что в Украине одни нацисты и геи. Вот как это можно одновременно и нацисты и геи?
That's how you can have Nazis and gays at the same time. I don't know. You certainly have a Jewish president. But again, logic is not Carlson's strength. He just doesn't care if it's logical or not. Then, of course, there's Elon Musk and others who advocate like that. Ultimately, I say, is it possible that Trump can be changed his mind? Yes, it is possible. Is it possible that someone could tell him that if he allows Putin to take all of Ukraine or even half of Ukraine, that would show Trump's weakness and America's weakness? It's possible, but how likely is it? I don't think it's very likely. I think it's much more likely that Tarl Carlson, Tulsi Gabbard, J.D. Vance, David Sachs, and others that we all know, more or less by now, support Putin. They're just going to win this argument because they're much more influential in the Republican Party today than people like Nikki Haley, John Bolton, John Kelly. And these are the kind of people who are certainly much more aggressive in the Republican Party. I think there was this civil war, and the Republican regenerators lost that war. So what are the chances of Kamala Harris and Donald Trump right now? Right now, one has 48%, the other has 48%. Before the weekend, we saw these kinds of estimates. Biden comes out, says, "I'm here as a mother. We've got to make this new song ring out in America." Well, will it resound? Who can tamper with that harmony of democracy and Democrats? The last question. We're going to see both at 48%. Unfortunately, we're seeing it. Well, again, I don't say unfortunately because I can't as a director, but my organization does not support either candidate or the other. But I will say that Trump has the advantage at the moment. Yes, they're literally in half, but we're seeing how in the last 3 to 4 weeks Kamala had an advantage, and that advantage has evaporated. That means the trend is going against her. Is it possible that this trend will say stop before the election? Yes, it is possible. But as of today, if we look at the market where people are trying somewhere around 80 million, we see people invested on this. Who's in favor of who? We see Trump winning somewhere around 60% of the RA and Kamala 40%. I think that's a little bit too much. I don't think it's such a big difference. But I would give Trump, as of today, 55% and Kamala 45%, just because of the fact that we're seeing this trend going in favor of Trump versus Kamala. How could that change? Number one, it could change if we see a lot more women coming out to vote than men. Women support Kamala a lot more than men, and men conversely support Trump.
Я думаю, что это слишком. Я не думаю, что такая большая разница. Но я бы дал Трампу на сегодняшний день 55%, а Камале 45%. Только из-за того, что мы видим, как этот тренд идет в поддержку Трампа против Камалы. Как это может измениться? Первое. Это может измениться, если мы увидим, что намного больше женщин выходит голосовать, чем мужчин.
Which means if more women come out to vote, it will give Kamala an advantage.
Значит, если больше женщин выйдут голосовать, то это дает Камале преимущество.
Then we see these polls that show that it's even, that it's 48.5 to 48.5. It's possible that these polls are wrong. It's possible that they're too far to the right, sort of in favor of Trump.
Как бы в поддержку Трампа. После того, как и в 16-м, и в 20-м году эти опросы
After those polls showed too little support for Trump in 2016 and 2020, then in the real election, Trump got a lot more support. Perhaps they reconsidered their position after that, and now they've switched sides. That's also a possibility. So if one of those things happens on November 5th, we may still see a swing for Kamala, but as of today, it's still Trump who has the advantage. What arguments are involved at campaign rallies? What themes are Kamala and Hari using to make this number of women who have come over to her side increase? And also, right off the bat, sometimes I just now have absolutely no bat with reality, like the likes of Trump, who go just head over heels, over dead bodies, and basically without principles, banning the same abortions, let's say, and saying that they're just so straight up religious with brains and bones. And you know, Iryna, I don't know how much I can help you because I'm lost too. And between you and me, how my countrymen look at this is very strange to me. Because yes, we all know Trump has slept with everyone. And yes, who knows if he paid for an abortion from someone or not. And yet, we also all know he's not a religious man either. And he couldn't even say a version from the Bible.
Там было очень знаменитое интервью, его спросили где-то 3-4 раза, какая его любимая фраза из Библии, он ничего не мог придумать.
There was a very famous interview. He was asked about 3 or 4 times what his favorite phrase from the Bible was. He couldn't think of anything. And so here's his answer to the question. He said, I love the whole Bible. See, that's not serious. But he doesn't care. He doesn't have any principles. So why not? Why not just say no abortions? What's more, we see that in the Republican Party, when Trump even tried a little bit to say no, he's against a nationwide abortion ban. But at the same time, his vice president, J.D. Vance, was saying that he just supports a national abortion ban.
Это национальное запрещение абортов. Значит, Камала, конечно, должна про это очень много говорит, и она про это и очень много говорит. Она говорит про аборт и так далее. То, что Камала не делает, и то, что она абсолютно должна сделать. Я очень надеюсь, что вот в следующей неделе она будет про это и говорить. Она должна про себя говорить.
So Kamala, of course, has to talk a lot about it, and she does talk a lot. She talks about abortion and so on. Things that Kamala doesn't do, and things that she absolutely should do. I really hope that next week she's going to be talking about it. She should be talking about pro-choice. Because yes, I think everybody already more or less knows who Trump is.
Как его бывший, еще другой бывший министр обороны Jim Mattis. Вот они все выступили.
And yes, we know that the Trumpian, just the former vice president, Mike Pence, came out against his former boss, Trump. We know how the Secretary of Defense, our former Asporas, has come out against Trump. How his highest General Milley, how his former chief, John Kelly, how his former Secretary of Defense, Jim Mattis, here they all came out against Trump. Unfortunately, not quite publicly, but let's just say half publicly. And despite that, people continue to be willing to vote for him. Kamala needs to give people reasons to vote for her, not just against Trump. She should address how she'll stop illegal immigration, support job growth, and reassure voters that she won't cater too much to the extreme left. Many Americans perceive her as part of the extreme left, partly due to her vocal stance in 2019 and 2020 during her last campaign.
2019 году, в 2020 году, когда она в прошлый раз баллотировалась, она очень много говорила.
That's just how it's like. She's from the extreme left, and now she has to change people's minds that know she's tied to the center. If she becomes president, she's going to be centrist. That, I think, is the key point that people need to realize about her. And so to date, they don't understand that. Because every time Kamala speaks, every time she says something, her campaign says something, they only talk about Trump and they say very little about her. Here I remember, she was on CNN, and she was asked by Anderson Cooper what policies she would promote in year one, and she couldn't answer anything. In another interview, she was asked how she was different from Joe Biden, and she couldn't answer either. And these are the kind of questions she has to be prepared for. She has to be able to answer them.
Она тоже не могла ответить. И вот на такие вопросы она должна быть готовой, она должна уметь отвечать на такие вопросы. И вот у нее осталось...
She has 1 week left, and I really hope that in that week, she's going to answer those questions more. Show people that a vote for her is not just a vote against Trump, it's also a vote for someone else. That's what I think is the key difference between what she's doing today and what she has to do in this final week of the election. Yes, we are at the finish line, just an inch away from the election in the States. And the tasks are even longer. Let's hope that everyone will have time to do what they have planned, and the winner of this race will be the one who can help us. Thank you, Uriel. We'll be following this week closely and hope to talk again in a week to analyze everything just hours before the elections. Thank you for this unbiased analysis. See you again. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Iryna Uzlova with Uriel Epstein, Executive Director of the Renew Democracy Initiative. We appreciate your time, comments, and likes. Please share your thoughts on the topics we discussed, like our conversation, and subscribe to UB24. Your support helps our discussions reach more people. Take care, believe in the Ukrainian armed forces, and see you next time. We will win.